Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're excited to introduce the power behind Mindful You this morning. The Mindful You mission statement is to develop mindful individuals and organizations to achieve personal and professional success through education, certification, benchmarking, and ongoing support. They've worked with several hundred clubs over the years and also offer certification through America's Healthiest Clubs program. Craig Marshall and Rick Ladendorf. Rick is the founder of Prevo Health Solutions, executive producer of America's Healthiest and Greenest Club, publisher of Passion, a digital publication, and co-founder of the 7 Mindful Living Habits of a Sustainable Club program. Craig Marshall, whose story is not made up, was a child actor in Hollywood and was influenced by 3 mentors, Ronald Reagan, Shirley Temple, and Donna Reed. Later graduated from USC Film School, and at that point, Craig's life took a left turn. He became a yoga monk with Self-Realization Fellowship, where he lived in a monastery for 35 years. As a respected Swami, Craig lectured to large audiences on mindfulness and meditation. He became a mentor to many well-known people, including Steve Jobs, George Harrison, and fashion icon Fred Siegel. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you guys today? Thanks for being on the Catalyst webinar series.
Nice to be with you, John. Thanks so much.
Rick is on there as well. Let me enable him. Mr. Ladendorf, good morning, sir. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series.
Thanks for having us, John. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, the monk and the mastermind, it is all yours. Take it away.
All right.
So welcome to this program on your role as a coach and a mentor. And I think that no matter what you're doing, what your role or responsibility is, you are a coach and you are a mentor, whether you know it or not, because we define leadership at Mindful You simply as influence. And if you have a husband or wife or a partner, or if you have kids, or if you are a golf pro, or if you sit in meetings, you are a leader. You are an influencer. And the only real question is, are we conscious of that, or are we just, habit driven and, playing the cards off the top of the deck? So today we want to talk about a few things. We're going to tell you about the Hacienda Golf Club in Southern California and what they've been through, sort of the before, during, and after, how they've dealt with this pandemic, the changes, the challenges. And I think it's fair to say that most all of us are going through similar things. So we're going to talk about also adapting to a changing world, because change is the name of the game these days. And we're going to introduce you to some mindful practices that can really take the edge off and help with critical and creative thinking and leading teams and being real and really helping people where they need help. And we're going to do a little guided meditation for 2 minutes. And then we're going to talk about some coaching and mentoring skills that you can take away, featuring core communication skills and a little bit about empathy. And finally, we're going to give you some specific coaching tools that you can use. So coaching is a very interesting topic. And I think it's fair to say that these days we all realize to one degree we need a little help from our friends, right? Because we're in some weird chapter of life now, right? Where it's like everything is in midair, where I'm an older guy. But when I grew up, like, interest rates were the same for, I think, 15 years. Eisenhower was the president, I think, when I was born. And so it was a simple, straightforward time. Now it's like everything's up for grabs. So much is being redefined and reevaluated, and it seems kind of topsy-turvy because it is, if nothing else, a major transition time. So, Rick, why don't you talk about how we came together and your journey a little bit?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
So, yeah, why don't you switch to the next slide, Craig, and I'll kind of give you an introduction. But My name is Rick Ladendorf, and I got into this business, the private country club industry, 22 years ago when I met John Fernaro from the Boardroom magazine. And I traveled with him, and I was in the space, and I fell in love with the club industry. And of course, I've always been a passionate golfer all my life. Not very good. That's why I'm not a PGA professional, but I love the sport, and it's a passion of mine. And 22 years ago, I really got to know the industry. But about 8 years ago, I created the America's Healthiest Clubs, and you see in the middle of the screen their logo. And what we've done is we've evaluated clubs all over the country in the area of health and wellness to say what makes a healthy club, created the standards, evaluated the clubs, and they use that emblem as a way of promoting it to their potential members as well as their current members. And that was 8 years ago, and we interview everybody, every single department head. So I've interviewed probably 6,000 people. I've visited over 300 clubs, and I think that I've become an expert in this area. And about 3 years ago, I met Craig Marshall, the monk, at the Reserve Club when we were doing a health retreat. Both Craig and I were speakers, and I called Craig up on the phone and wanted to get to know a little bit more about him. And I've never met a monk before. So it was a very interesting conversation for me. But what had happened in that conversation was transformational. And that was, it went from a conversation with the clubs from a health and wellness perspective. How do we keep our members healthy so they play more golf, so they use the club more often, so they're more engaged, to a more of a mindful conversation? Because at the end of the day, I think we all know that we should eat better, we should get more exercise, it'll make us a better golfer, etc. But at the end of the day, really mindfulness became an overarching umbrella to what I think really gets to the core of what really matters. So 3 years ago, Craig and I met, and we began doing lectures and education all over the country. And you can see some of the logos of the clubs that we do business with locally here: Jonathan Club, the Reserve Club, Hacienda, of course, Blackhawk, some of the clubs that you know, and I'm sure you know some of the folks that are running those clubs. But bottom line is, Craig and I created Mindful You as a way of actually addressing the real issues in the club industry, not the symptoms of being too busy or stressed out or overwhelmed. Those are just symptoms of the problem. The real problem is our egos and the way we communicate with people and the way we deal with our stress and our anxiety and our overwhelm and our upset members and our collaboration with other team members and that sort of thing. So Craig and I have taught and educated hundreds and hundreds of people, and now we actually certify people as mindful professionals. And along the way, we've been recognized in the Boardroom magazine, and a couple of different times actually this year, one of which was as a key influencer in the industry. And so we're aligned with some folks that you probably know a lot about: Copland, Keeler, Wallace, and Club Benchmarking, and some of these other major influencers in the industry. And we recognize people in our own publication we call Passion. So we've been in the industry I've been in the industry for 23 years, Craig for 3 years, but we've applied the mindfulness in the world of the business culture and the club culture itself. So at this point, I think the next slide, Craig, is the Hacienda. But Craig, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just give you a little thumbnail about what the heck a monk is doing in this conversation. And I've been playing golf since I was about 13 years old, and I actually had my only hole-in-one when I was a monk. So, but I did travel the world. I didn't have my head in the sand, and so I've lectured globally to audiences as large as 7,000 people, probably 1,000 times. So I was doing that, talking about meditation and mindfulness practices, which seem more relevant nowadays than ever. And then I also was a personal coach to a lot of really influential and powerful people. And I worked with Steve Jobs toward the end of his life, and really got down to the bare bones with him. And I was with George Harrison actually when he passed away. And so working with people like that showed me about power, influence, glitz and glamour, all of that stuff. But underneath that Rick and I really strive to get to the core of what really matters. And it's the same almost everywhere because people are people. And so we'd like to talk a little bit about Hacienda Golf Club in Brea. And we were drawn into there by their GM, Russell Silte, who is a PGA master professional. And Rick, why don't you talk about how we first met?
Right. Well, we were introduced to Russell through John Fernaro at the Boardroom magazine. And I asked John if he knew of anybody that was really practicing sort of a mindful approach to life and managing a business. And he says, oh, you have to call Russell. So I called Russell up and I introduced myself, and he, within 5 minutes, said, we want you to come out to our weekly managers meeting on Thursday. Come on out. I'll introduce you to our team and see what they think. We were expecting a 5-minute introduction of ourselves, and we were going to be a fly on the wall. We're going to meet their team and try to just sort of get a feel for it. Well, we met Russell at about 8:30 in the morning. The meeting started at 9:30. We sat in the meeting, and the meeting lasted about 90 minutes. And instead of being a fly on the wall, the conversation revolved around everything we were about in terms of mindfulness and our programs and our education. Then we decided to have lunch with Russell. Then we played golf with Russell. Then we had dinner with Russell. We left at 9:30 that evening. So it was an amazing day. And fast forward, they have been in our program for over a year. And as you can see from the slide, they presented us with a plaque, but I love the way they presented this to us, because on the bottom of the plaque, there was an insignia that says, in appreciation from the Hacienda Mindfulness Leaders. And Hacienda Group actually went through a program with us. It started a year ago, and they've all graduated as certified mindful professionals. And it's been an amazing life story change for many of them. We've got great stories we can tell. And if Jonathan's on if we can unmute Jonathan, I'd like to introduce Jonathan, because in his own words, he can tell you a little bit about how he went through the program and had access to the tools that we provide on a dashboard. We call the Mindful You dashboard, or the portal. Jonathan, are you there?
Oh, John, that's Jonathan Golia.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Oh, great.
Jonathan, in your own words, because you're a PGA professional, tell the audience what you have learned and what your experience has been, because I think it's really important for you to share some of your thoughts in terms of what this really has meant to you as a professional, but also as a human being, and in both work and life.
Yeah, first off, thanks for having us on here. This is a pretty big honor. I don't have enough time to summarize everything that we've learned through this process. That would take too long. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet, and kind of keep it focused on the name of this catalyst, which is, your role as a coach and a mentor. One thing that I think is the most important nugget of information that I got out of this program was, we are all influencers. And that's not only in our work life, but in our personal life as well. And we influence people whether you know it or not. And Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 75% of tells that people see from you are all body language. And if I come into work as the head golf professional, which I have a team of 20 that work beneath me, if I come in and I'm down in the dumps and I've had a bad morning and I'm just lollygagging around and I'm all upset, that's gonna influence the team around me. They're gonna, oh boy, here we go, he's in a bad mood, stay out of the way. Versus with this program, you become more mindful. You go, okay, every step I take, everything I do is going to influence people in one way or another. And just to be aware of that and be mindful of that is a huge help to the daily life. And we find ourselves being so much more productive as a team just by being aware of that. This program that we went through is really fun and really fascinating. And as a golf professional, I think it's worth looking into. If anyone on this Catalyst wants to talk to me personally, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to explain it in a little more depth, but we've learned a lot as a team. And to close, I think the second biggest nugget that we pulled out of this, or I pulled out, was, I think, Rick, at the beginning, the first time we met, that meeting you're talking about, you say one of the things we try and do is break down the silos, and meaning food and beverage operation is its own silo. Golf course operations, they're their own silo. The golf operations in the golf shop, they're their own silo. The administration office, they're their own silo. And through this program, we're able to break those down and work together as a team. And during this pandemic, it could not have been more timely, because instead of cutting each other's heads off in this stressful time, we're able to work together and grow and make the best of this crazy situation that we're going through, and everyone's going through it. So I'm grateful, and Craig and Rick, thank you very much for everything that you've done. It's helped me both personally and professionally. So I don't want to take up any more time, because this is your show. So thank you both.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I think that the easiest approach to this is, people say, well, what the heck is mindfulness? I mean, that word is sort of heading into the mainstream now, but I think we all want to be more aware. And as a coach, you kind of need to read between the lines of what people are saying. You need to deal with both their thoughts and their feelings. This is kind of, you hear about emotional intelligence. And then, of course, we want to be driven by the power of purpose. So we want to align the mission statement of the club with what's going on at the leadership level, and push it all the way down through management and the line staff. So everybody's in sync, everybody's pulling together, everybody is inspired. And inspired leadership doesn't happen by accident. It is really created by people who are aware and are purpose driven. And then we get down to creating, number 4, a whole culture. And that spreads out even into the local community, and all the PR around it, the reputation you have. How do you stack up against the competition? Because these days, people are more discriminating than ever. Number 5 is about creativity and innovation. Number 6 is change and transition. And 7 is core communication skills. And we're going to be talking about a little of all of these things today. But right now, I think that pushing pause is a real skill. And I learned to do this through meditation. And meditation is not sitting with your eyes crossed or, focusing on your belly button. Meditation is a way to call time out. It's a way to push pause. And if we can't do that consciously these days, we're going to be part of the problem, not the solution, because there's just too much going on. There's too many pressures. There's too much media. There's too many conflicts. There's too many angry members, and so we're all dealing with these things in one shape or another. But when you take a look at stress, it's pretty scary almost, because it influences the body, mind, the emotions, and the behaviors. Just take a look at some of these things, from fatigue to negativity and foggy thinking, down to loss of confidence, all the way down to substance abuse, loss of appetite, loneliness, insomnia. A lot of people are having sleep issues these days. Stress used to be kind of normal, but I think now people are saying, hey, is my lifestyle sustainable? I need to get a hold of my head. And what does that look like? So in these meetings we've had with Jonathan's group at Hacienda, we introduced meditation, and we talked about it, how it worked, the benefits of it. And they said, could we try it? So we started doing a guided meditation, just 2 minutes long. And we talked about the breath, the relationship with the mind and the consciousnness and the ego. And so they got so jazzed that we start every meeting off now with a 2-minute meditation, just to get grounded. So if you're up for it, why don't we try it right now? Just take a couple of minutes. So here we go. Sit up straight with your back away from the back of the chair. Wherever you're sitting, scoot away from the back of the chair so your spine is separated from your couch or the chair. Sit up straight, shoulders back, close your eyes, and place your hands at the junction of the thighs and the abdomen with the palms upturned. This pushes the shoulders way back, which expands the lungs, which is really important. Now close your eyes and focus at the point between and just above the eyebrows, but no strain of the eyes. And now make a mental resolve not to move, absolute stillness. So this is a timeless yogic posture which allows for the freest force of the life energy within the body. And thousands of years ago, the yogis discovered that there was a direct relationship between breath and mind. Because most of us, they say, think about 1,000 thoughts an hour. That's a thought every 2 2/3 seconds. Thought, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Thought, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Thought. That's the tempo. Thought. So if we want to slow that down so we can go a little deeper and be more creative and call time out and really relax like we do in sleep, but we just want to do this for 2 minutes. The first thing to do is to start watching your breath. So right now, let's take a couple of deep breaths together. Let's all inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. Exhale. Now just watch your breath at the nostrils. Watch it coming in and going out naturally. If a thought comes to you, just gently push it away. Go back to your focus on the breath. Let's just do this together. Watching the breath come and go. Now, as you do this, what will happen every single time is your breath will slow down, your heart will slow down, and then that thought tempo will slow down. And so think about it. When your breath slows down, that means there's a longer pause between inhalation and exhalation, and a longer pause between exhalation and inhalation. Those pauses get longer and longer and longer. And it's in those pauses that we feel the first benefit of meditation, and that is a feeling of peace. And that's only the beginning, because then we start to get creative ideas. We start to relax on a really deep, visceral level. We start to see a bigger picture. We start to think longer term. We start to climb out of our little self-made hell or purgatory. And then 2 minutes later, we're a different person. So open your eyes right now. It's like, I feel different. I don't know if you do, but every time I do meditation, it's like 2 minutes is enough. So that's all. Just start there and watch. I do it during the day when I get frazzled or anything comes up, because we are living in very uncertain times. You know, we heard a lot of Jonathan's cohorts at Hacienda, like many club people, tell us the same thing. Man, we're just grinding these days. You know, we're having to work longer hours. We're having to do more with less resources. It's putting pressure on all of us. I'm working longer hours. When I'm home, I'm tired. I can't focus on the kids. You know, it's really sucking people because they're overwhelmed, right? And you're dealing with overwhelmed and angry members. So, you know, customer service isn't what it used to be, because the world is changing. Every single person is in transition, because most golf pros got into the field because of their passion, right? So what's next? This grind, it's not sustainable. It can't go on, because a lot of people, as Jonathan said, are coming to work angry. You have to deal with them. You have to deal with members and colleagues. How do you manage all of this? Well, this Stephen Hawking, the great physicist, said, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. Ain't that the truth? So how do we handle transitions and change and all the forces that are on us these days? It's an open question, but mindfulness really is so core that it really does deal with the issue itself. I don't know if you've ever heard about this so-called Carnegie Triangle, but it was the result of a study done way back by an organization who was studying the components of business success, and it was sponsored by the Carnegie Institute. And after interviewing thousands of people, they realized that there were 3 components of business success. And this was across many different industries. They were, of course, skills, knowledge, and attitude. But the blow mind result from this study was that attitude represented 85% of success. Isn't that amazing? Where it's like when you're hiring somebody, sure, they have to have the skills and the knowledge, but that's pretty easy to come by. But this attitude, wow, how do you find somebody with a twinkle in their eye and a smile on their lips and an open personality so that they can learn and change and grow and take next steps? That's the core of what you're looking for. And we equate the word mindfulness to attitude. It's very similar. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Abraham Maslow. He was a very famous psychologist that came up with this Maslow pyramid of needs. And it's an interesting psychological thing because it's real current right now. And his word proprioception, which is a $5 word, meaning that you have to accomplish one level before you can move to the next. On the bottom is physiological needs. We all want to have a roof over our head and food in our bellies, right, before we can move up. Then we need safety and that sense of security. Then we can move up to love and belonging. Then we get up to self-esteem. And then finally, there is this self-actualization or being all you can be. The point is right now, all of us have kind of fallen down a rung on this, right? We're not so confident these days. We don't really know what's going on politically, economically, socially. There's a wobble in the force, right? So what are our life balance priorities? How do we balance things? How do we understand? Well, from a mindful point of view, I'm just going to throw out some topics that we dug into with many, many clubs in depth. First of all, realizing that your thoughts are creating your daily reality. We are creating our own reality with our moods and our attitude, whether we know it or not. We're not victims of circumstance. It's our mindset that's the major thing. Number two, recognize the price you're paying for sustained stress. 3, understand healthy boundary issues. If somebody else has a problem, it doesn't mean it's your problem. You have to deal with it, but it doesn't mean if they're in the dumps, you go down in the dumps. Next is about people pleasing, because being service-oriented and being there for people is one thing. But if you're a people pleaser, you'll probably end up passive aggressive and someday you'll blow up. And many people do it and it triggers a midlife crisis or something like that. Next is, who is the most balanced person you know? If you think about it right now, who is a healthy specimen? Who do you know in your environment? Who has the cool factor? Who's a fun person? Who cares about other people? Talk to that person sometime, and maybe they could be a coach for you. It's nice to have colleagues on this deeper level. And then finally, last but not least, this is one thing I tell myself all the time. When things get muddled or I start to get frazzled, I say to myself, hey, there's nothing serious going on here. Because in a year or 5 years, I won't even remember what's going on. Let's have a little perspective. So when we're coaches or when we're dealing with other people, how do we really affect them in terms of making change? If we're team leaders like Jonathan, how do we up the performance of our whole team? How do we move that needle? Well, it starts with education. Then comes application. You have to do it. Then we need metrics to measure before, during, and after. And then finally, we need some feedback and ongoing support. And I think most of us have been to a rah-rah Tony Robbins weekend or a dynamic workshop like that, or we've read books on communication skills or leadership skills. We've all done those things because we're sincere and we want to take our game to the next level. But it takes more. It takes ongoing support. And that's why we work with people one-on-one as coaches. We do that. And also, we do these classes. And we get to know each other and we really drill down. And that's what makes the difference, because we want to deal with the solutions, not the symptoms. That's basically why I became a monk many years ago, is that I was lazy. I didn't want to keep weeding my lawn. I wanted to pull out my problems by the roots. Doesn't that make sense? And I think any leader who has a team under them, they don't like dealing with the same old issues, the same old moody people. You know, how can we take our game, both personally, ourselves, and other people, to that next level? So what is mindfulness? Well, it is heightened awareness, but it comes through learning how to pay attention to what's really going on, to read between the lines, to have that sensitivity, to see the bigger picture, and aligning with purpose. It's also about presence, being focused, being able to listen to people, and not judging them and writing them off and labeling things so we can learn and grow. And that learning and unlearning is so important, especially these days during transition times. And the value of mindfulness is pretty straightforward, but your stress is going to go way down. You will see a bigger picture. You will have more life balance. You'll be able to push that pause at will. You'll be more creative, productive, as will your team. And you'll have a deeper connection with others. It'll be real friendships. It takes work, but you'll have more innovative decisions. You'll be a real creator, and people will want to be around you because your capacity to think out of the box is greater. Plus, you'll have just more raw happiness and fun. So if we look at like before, during, and after, if you look at an old school leader, say from 20 years ago, it was a pyramid, right? Organizations were very vertical, but the bosses were stressed out and that stress trickled down. They never had time because everybody was so busy. And we still have a little of that, right? We're busy. Everybody's got their hair on fire. We hear this regularly. And there's a short-term focus. There's a task orientation. This is different than, Covey, beginning with the end in mind, seeing that big picture, So we get habit-driven. We get into routines. We get ego-driven. And then it falls down. We become edgy and sensitive and touchy. And then there's that survival mentality. I just want to get through the day. I don't have any creative capacity. And these silos that Jonathan was talking about, they're a problem everywhere. And there's no succession strategy or cross-training or all of that. And there's a complacency. Or if you look at a 21st century mindful leader, they're calm, they're cool, they're collected. They focus on what matters most. They're aligned with the vision. They keep it in mind. They're open to learn and unlearn. They're like kids. They're lifetime learners. It's so exciting. They have this emotional intelligence. They're purpose-driven. They're collaborators. They're not solo operators. They don't have that world on their back like Atlas. It's a team stance. And they're invested in the team in the future, and they're forward thinking. That's apples and oranges, these two things. But this is hard for all of us. It really is. It really is hard for all of us to jump into this because there's three kinds of employees. Fundamentally, there's our champions, who are early adopters and that sort of things. These are the gung-ho people, who appreciate our input, want the feedback. Then there's the potentials. These are the swing voters in the middle, They might be able to step up and they might not. And then there's the functionaries who just want to get the job done. They just want the check in the mail. They just, are kind of business as usual, and they're not somebody you can really count on. So dividing up and seeing what people can handle is one of the coaching things that's very valuable to know who you're talking to. Because people often ask, what's the difference between a coach and a consultant? And it's pretty big, where consultants get paid to come in, study the culture, and tell you what to do. They give you reports, they make suggestions. Where a coach really recognizes that everybody has within them the capacity to take next steps. People basically have the answers within themselves. And a coach is trying to motivate people and encourage people to dig in and find that for themselves. So the coach is really an empowerer, So this is a really important distinction. And, football season started a few weeks ago, and it's a very interesting controversy now because Tom Brady is no longer with the New England Patriots, right? So now that he's down in Tampa Bay, everybody's kind of curious, how are they going to do? They have this superstar, and even though he's like 42 or 43 years old, he still has talent. But Bill Belichick has a very different rehab kind of quarterback. And so which is more important, the people, the players, or the coaching? Well, that remains to be seen. They're both important, I think, but I'd bet on the coach. In 5 years, I'd bet on Belichick because always he's taken blue-collar players. I mean, the New England Patriots, they draft number 31 or 32 every year. They never have the superstars. They never can draft them. They never have salary cap issues. Why? Because they coach them up. They create a team. They create a culture. They create hard workers. They do cross-training. When one person gets injured, the Patriots never have a problem. You ever notice this? It's unbelievable. No other team is able to do that. Coaching is valuable for this reason. Number one, we all need support. Why? Because all of us have biases and cultural limitations and limited thinking patterns, and we all have blind spots. We only know what we know, right? So you all are coaches. You're dealing with a lot of diverse kinds of people, How do you deal with them individually? And I didn't learn this in school. It's almost tragic, isn't it? We're only learning it in on-the-job training. We're learning the hard way. Well, here's 2 basics that I should have learned in school. 4 things people are looking for in life. Number 1, they want to feel important. So if you can make them feel important, you're going to be their best friend. They're looking for meaningful relationships, connections. We all want that. Number 3, they're looking for a successful career, and that means both as a parent and as a spouse or a partner and at work. And finally, they want a feeling of sense of self, meaning they're doing what they came to do in this life. They're happy. If they died tomorrow, they go, hey, I'm where I belong. I'm doing my thing. This is great. So keep these in mind. And when you check out the PowerPoint of this class, make a note of that, because that will serve you every single day. Now, the tool that we use regularly to get people to focus and to help, and this can be used in committee meetings, this can be used when you're going to have a tough meeting with an individual, it's called a focus wheel. And you can just draw something like this. It's just, a couple concentric circles and a bunch of pizza slices. But you can also download this app from the App Store, and it's digital and it slides around and you can type into it. And so we use this with all of our groups, and Jonathan is very familiar with this, because whenever there's challenges, whether it's a personality thing or a strategic next step or dealing with a problem that's arisen, is you write a goal in the middle, and then you write the benefits of achieving that goal or the causes of the problem in those outer sections. And this is like, it's almost yogic. It causes you to stop and to drill down deeper. It changes the way you think. Because in systems thinking, they say that what you think is less important than how you think. And this is a really slick tool. You can use this with your kids. If you're going to clean out the garage and you want the family support on Saturday or something, this is a tool to use to get everybody on board. Say, why should we clean up the garage, And when you start writing these benefits, it's like, wow, we could do this. We could hang the bikes up there. Well, you know what? We could put the ping pong table in there. If you pull the car, we could make a record. All these ideas come out of that kind of thinking. The focus wheel is a great tool. But communication issues are really where the rubber meets the road with individuals. And the number 1 thing I always try to keep in my mind is it's not about the message I'm sending out. It's about the message the person I'm talking to is receiving. Because we think they're hearing what we say, but they're not. They're interpreting what we say for many, 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 many reasons. And so we're going to dig into this in future classes, and maybe some of these can be shared with you. But how do you know the message has been received? You have to ask questions. So in our world, and what we teach are the 3 primary communication skills are listening, and most of us are pretty pitiful listeners. Number 2 is questioning, because if you ask the right questions, you get closer to the right answers. So that's a way of driving conversations deeper, is questioning. And finally, storytelling. That is the primary way that people learn. That's the value of myths. That's the value of Aesop's fables. And they say the most beautiful words in any language are once upon a time. So instead of giving advice, if you tell somebody a story, they will get it times 10. This is a very complex, deep subject. And if you're watching this on the screen and you got your camera, take a picture of this slide right now. This book, I read it on an airplane when Rick and I were traveling somewhere. This is a book that will change your life. This guy, Michael Bungay-Stanier, I don't know much about him. He wrote a book called The Coaching Habit, Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. And it gives you 7 what he calls can opener questions, which are sequential questions that you can ask somebody. So if you have a problem person, somebody's a laggard, or somebody isn't performing and you'd like to see them go to the next level and you want to sit down and have a conversation, this is the sequence of questions to ask them to get down to what really, really matters and talk a language they can hear. And they will then tell you what's really on their mind, what's really going on in their life. And then you can deal with the core issues, not the superficial or the symptoms. Because when we deal with groups at clubs, we buddy people up because they do actual exercises. It's not just academic learning, yak, 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 like we did in school, which was so boring. But we actually run through specific exercises. They do things. They go through case studies. They create worlds. They reach out to management. They reach out to their line staff and do certain things and get certain feedback. So having a mindful buddy is very important, not only for accountability, but for creativity as well. So it's really true that two heads are better than one. So when we have a mindful buddy, it's like life becomes different. A wingman, it's completely different. Rick and I actually even have a mastermind group, and we'd love to invite some of you to that group if you have time. It's an ongoing meeting where industry influencers share best practices, what they're learning, what their challenges are, and people walk away from this very, very inspired. Now, emotional intelligence is a word you hear getting kicked around these days, and we're not going to go into it too much now. That's a subject for another day. But that's what we want to be, because this little empathy map, and if you look at the PowerPoint PDF from this, this is a great cheat sheet right here. Because when you're dealing with anybody about any sensitive subject, what they say is one thing, what they think is another, what they do is another, and what they feel is another. And this is a little prompt to ask questions of yourself to really understand, you know, where people are at and how you can connect with them on that empathetic level. And, you know, this stuff applies at home too. You know, if you have a partner, there's differences of opinion all the time, right? And especially when you're dealing with men and women, there's different ways they think and there's different ways they feel. There's gender issues, there's age issues, there's socioeconomic issues. And communication and empathy go hand in hand and can really make a difference in our decisions, in creating those relationships, and taking the next step forward. So we're really all excited to share our time. But where do we go from here? So let's talk. Are there any questions? Or John, do you have any feedback? Or where do you all stand with all of what's going on today, and what's the next step for you where you're at?
Craig, are you speaking to me?
Yeah.
Where I'm at is just being able to be more conscious of the message that's being said rather than my focus on what is being said. Because so oftentimes with teammates, frontline employees, fellow department heads, and even members, the focus is always heavy on what I'm saying from my point of view, but as you alluded to a moment ago, the way it's being perceived is so much more conscious of how I'm saying it. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
Yeah. John, one of the exercises that we do, I find very interesting. We actually ask the team to write an angry email, right? This is the member that really irritated you, or it might be one of your peers, or it could be a staff member, but it's somebody that really got under your skin. And so we asked them to write that email and just vent, explain how you feel and get it off your chest. And then we asked them to meet with their mindful buddy and rewrite that email to reflect what the audience or the recipient can actually hear. And it is really an amazing experience. So I'm sure we've all done this, right? You write this letter and you hit the send button and then you reread it. The person on the other end could not understand or receive that information, and then it just caused more problems. So rewriting that in a more mindful way really, really, truly helps to actually focus on what they can hear. And it's amazing what it does for that communication. So do you have other questions?
It's true. It's true. And let me, before we go on to the next question, let me follow my own advice, John. And instead of giving advice, let me tell you a story. One time, Rick had written an angry email to a club general manager who wasn't returning phone calls, although he said he was very interested in what Rick wanted to talk to him about, wasn't returning emails. And Rick was about ready to give up on this guy and write him a Dear John letter, right? You know, so he wrote this email, but before he sent it, he called me up and he says, you know, I'm just really angry with this dude, and I've had enough with him, and we're wasting both of our time. So I just would like to clean up the relationship. If he's not interested, fine. But if he is, and I think I can help him with this thing, I'd love to connect with him. So he said, can I send you this email? So we did a screen share. I looked at it and I asked him the $64,000 question. Rick, I understand that this is healthy for you. You're getting this steam out, you're getting this off of your chest, but I don't think this guy can hear this because he's going to feel judged. And he also is probably not feeling good about himself anyway, because he was like many managers, just running ragged and kind of reactive. And he really wasn't a mindful guy at that point. And so Rick said, yeah, that's probably true. So I said, well, instead of making a statement here, let's ask him a question. Let's reformat this. Let's not use this because that'll be a hot button word for this guy. Let's see it from his point of view because he's probably a little bit fragile. So we rewrote the email. Rick pushed send. And within 5 minutes, the guy emailed Rick back and called him on the phone. And now he and his whole management team is one of our clients, and they're really turning a corner. Isn't that a wild story? And it's not just patting ourselves on the back. This is what we all need to do, is take a second look at things. Because in the beginning, oftentimes in situations that are challenging for us, we are not mindful. We have to then reformat our hard disk and become mindful, become empathetic, become listeners, become good moms and dads. It takes a little work, but once we learn these skills, then they can become more automatic. So what other questions have you gotten in the chat box, John?
So far, can you cover a pricing structure for your guys' services? It's a longer question than that, but basically that's what he's asking.
Yeah,
sure.
That
Take to secure your guys' services, and what's the scale and the breadth of that?
Right. It's a very difficult question to answer because we have so many different programs. There are introductory workshops that we can do that are 30 to 60 minutes in length, and you can get in for a couple $100 and we can educate your whole entire team or your management team. And then there's additional certification programs that you can do on a monthly subscription. So it's less than $50 a month, and or you can get into a certification program which could take 26 weeks, and that's less than $500 for an entire certification program. We have coaching services that can be offered to management as well as leadership team. So there's a number of different programs. So it's a really difficult question, but really, truly, to start off, really for a few $100s, you could actually start with individual or team-based programs. So, and it really depends on where you are at as a leader, but also it depends on where the club or the organization is at in terms of their openness, willingness, etc. So it really depends, because we really focus on 3 levels: leadership, management, and staff. So it all kind of depends. But we'll send you this PowerPoint in a PDF format, and it'll have our information if you want to advance the screen, Craig. If you want to write down our information. But I'd be more than happy to help with understanding what that is. And we actually start with a discovery process. So we'll send you a link where you answer a few questions, and that'll help us to better gauge where you're at and what you're open to. So, but it's not a very expensive program, and I can tell you that, even if you looked at an enterprise-wide solution, it'd be less than 10 grand for the whole year for the whole club. So hopefully that answers the question.
John, one of the things that we worked with a lot of different people, and clubs tell us initially, well, we're a very special culture, we're unique, but yet we all are human beings, so we all share the same kind of headspace. and we're all going through transitions these days. So this shoe kind of fits most feet. And an HR director at a Florida club, Broken Sound, is a very conscious gal, and she puts a lot of energy into educating her people, and they have a pretty crack operation, I would say. And they have bats on the golf course in little bat houses, and the bats eat the mosquitoes, so you can play golf in the afternoon without getting bitten by mosquitoes. They have bees that create their own honey, which they sell to the members. I mean, it's like a little paradise they've created there. They're so together. But she told us, she said, I don't want you to make my managers better managers. I want you to make them better people, because then they'll be better managers. And I thought, wow, you are intuitive. You are savvy, because we all want to upgrade, you know? And I think when we look at what's going on in the world today, John, I think it's a healthy thing. It's a messy thing. It's a scary thing, but I think essentially it's an evolutionary thing, because I think the whole world is being called to take a next step in being mindful, you know, in communication, in empathy, in connecting with people on deeper and deeper levels, because our old ways are not enough. You know, I just saw in the LA Times this morning that the governor has signed a bill saying that there'll be no more combustion engine cars sold after the year 2035, only electric or whatever fuel they have by then. You know, it's like, that's drawing a line in the sand and saying, we're going to step over it. We're going to have a healthier air climate. We're going to have a healthier use of resources. And so I think on any front, everything is wobbling. And there's a huge argument these days between A and B, whatever you call that, left or right, red and blue, rich or poor, you know, black or green or yellow or white, or, you know, all these different divisions, because I think it's a call for all of us to come together, not deciding at A or C, A or B, but developing C. What is that next step? What is the innovation? How do we go beyond these things? How do we create win-wins? I think that's what we all want. Because one of the things we get into too, John, is generational issues. And the millennial folk, not to mention Generation Z that's coming online, they think differently. And so how do old school people like me relate to those people? I have to learn a new language. It's not that I'm selling out on my values, and it's not that I'm going to meet them halfway as some sort of a compromise, but what is the win-win? How can we take their finest distinctive features, and they certainly have them, and mine, and weld them together into something that's super functional? It's a great question. So that's when these 7 can opener questions really come into play. So it takes a lot of tools, but it all begins with openness. Openness. That's where this whole conversation starts. If people don't want to take next steps, if they're satisfied with business as usual, if they're happy with their family situation and their work situation and nothing needs tweaking, they don't need us. So, any other questions, John, from the gang?
Yes. When working with a new team of managers, how do you go about getting everybody on board, especially in situations where, let's say you got a general manager and you've got 5 or 6 department heads, and then they're all in a room together, and you've got, 90% of the people in that room are on board and are open to new things, and the attitude for mindfulness is there, but there's 1 or 2 that are resisting or not buying in. What are some of the pratfalls of that scenario, and what are some of the things that you guys do in order to get everybody to buy in? Because it's very similar to when you have a team of employees, and 90% of them are on board and bought in, but there's 1 or 2 that aren't. And how do you do 2 things? How do you get the 2 that aren't bought in to buy in? And how do you, in that process and in the interim, how do you keep those 2 from becoming a cancer to the ones that are bought in already?
Well, ain't that a good question? We all can relate to that, right? And many general managers have told Rick and I, I just wish I could fire everybody and start from scratch. It's like, wow, well, that speaks more about the leader than it does about the culture, and is that leader ready to hear that? I doubt it. So first of all, yeah, you do need to divide your team into those thirds that we were talking about, because, here's what you have. You have your potential champions, you have your potential whatever, and then you have your functionaries. So it's like, where do you spend your time? Well, you want to empower the champions. You want to influence the potentials to become champions and buy in. And yet some of these functionaries are very valuable because they know their jobs and they're not interested in any upward mobility. But those people that are stinking up the place, that's a different category. And let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, I was dealing with a major company. They're an international billion dollar club. They're a Fortune 10. And again, they asked the same question. And the manager told me, he said, I'm not interested in this mindfulness. I know you've worked with several groups in our organization. I personally don't see the ROI on it. I said, yeah, I understand that. You're a brass guy. You measure everything, and we can benchmark certain things. But I said, are you aware of what your people think about you? And he stopped and he said, not really. I said, would you like to know? Would that be valuable? And he said, yeah, I would really like to know. I said, would you like to hear the truth, or you want to hear happy talk? He said, no, I'd really like to know. So I said, well, let me interview your managers underneath you. It's about 8 people. And I said, I'll let you know. And so I interviewed them all. They said, this guy's a jerk, and he says he has an open door policy. But sure, he has an open door policy because he's a jerk and nobody wants to go talk to him, so he's clueless. He really doesn't get us. And so I thought to myself, okay, this guy can't hear that language. He will feel judged. He will shut down. He'll project it onto them and say, oh, they're out to lunch. They don't know what's going on. He does this and he doesn't do that, So I had to translate what his team said into a language he could hear. So I said something like, well, they'd like to have a closer relationship with you because they really know that you know a lot, but yet they think you're too busy and they don't want to take your time. Wow, he could hear that. Well, he said, what could I do? I said, well, why don't you one by one invite them into your office, start off with a half-an-hour little meeting, and just get to know them without any business agenda, and then I'll take it from there. After he did that with these 8 people, he called and he says, they're starting to come in my office. They're starting to be receptive. He said, I was ready to fire them all a year ago. And I thought, wow. One of my heroes, John, is a gal named Margaret Wheatley. And if you read her book, it's called Leadership and the New Science. It was written a long time ago, like 30 years ago. But she said there's nothing more important than a group of people coming together to find out what means the most to them. And she wrote another book on the genesis of the greatest innovations of our era. And most of them did not start in a committee meeting. They did not start in anybody's office. They started in a bar or a restaurant after work. Isn't that interesting? Where people are relaxed. They're having a beer. They're shooting the bull, And it's like, that is the environment that you want to create so that you can get this team spirit and this creativity and, oh, I could cover for you. Oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Or, oh, let me share this book that I just read, And then people become a family and a team. But it takes this nurturing step by step. And then you end up with this family spirit. But there still may be some people that you have to weed out, or they will weed themselves out over time. But this is a starting point for building a sustainable culture. Any other questions?
That is, one more time through this real quick here. Yeah, it looks like that.
I know we're at our time limit.
Yeah, that's no problem. Those are all the questions that have come in from the question box. On behalf of the Catalyst webinar series and the Education Committee for the SoCal PGA, Craig, Rick, thank you so much for your time in broadening our horizon this morning. Great stuff. I mean, really, it seems fundamental, but we don't go there, and we should. And we appreciate you for being on the program this morning. For everybody on the Catalyst, we're going to send out the YouTube recording of Craig and Rick's presentation, along with a PDF of their presentation. Want to encourage everybody to be on the Catalyst webinar next week. We've got Lynette Carty from the PGA of America who's going to be on, educating us about diversity and inclusion, and looking forward to that. Craig, Rick, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks so much, John.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for supporting the Catalyst webinar series. Stay safe, stay sane.
Thank you, John.